Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another exciting edition of the GBI show. That's right, it's Gridiron Betting Insights right here on ATS. Sanin, your host on a show where nothing is made up and the points do matter. This week's show, we're going to cover week 7 of the NFL schedule, get you ready for it from a betting perspective. Of course, some teams on bye weeks this week, including the Jacksonville Jaguars, much to the chagrin of all of the young women of the American Midwest. Watch out for Urban Meyer, folks. But we will get you some perspective on all the games on the week 7 schedule, get you some of the looks that I am focusing in on for this week, and maybe we'll have a little bit of fun as well. We'll see what happens. Of course, if you're watching live, you can chat with us on YouTube and Twitter. If you are watching on demand, listening to the podcast feed, we appreciate you as well. So let's get right into it, folks. Here, week 7 of the NFL schedule. And of course, it started with Thursday Night Football. Usually we record the show on Thursday before Thursday Night Football because of some parenting duties and things of that nature. We are doing it on Friday morning here this week. So Thursday Night Football is already in the books. The Denver Broncos falling to the Cleveland Browns. And we'll talk about that real quick. The Browns got down to about 1.5 close to kickoff. Their total was around 40. The game went under. And the Browns did cover as a home favorite with Case Keenum as their quarterback. And really the takeaway here for me, I mean, number one, we already knew that the running game for the Cleveland Browns was incredible. We knew it was the best in the league. And they proved that with a third-string running back coming in and just running wild all over the Denver Broncos. That's not the big takeaway for me in this game. For me, the big takeaway is the fact that you had a Denver Broncos team. They ran through 3 really low quality opponents to start their season. And it was a situation where you said, okay, can they back it up against better competition? The answer clearly has been no, right? They were destroyed by Baltimore. The Pittsburgh Steelers did a good job against them in that game in Pittsburgh. And now Cleveland, with a backup quarterback and a third string running back, tears them apart early in that game and creates an insurmountable lead of 10 points. Who would have thought that would have been good enough? But it was. And to me, I mean, just a damaging loss for the Denver Broncos. I mean, sports betting aside, the Denver Broncos now are clearly in the category of, they're like the best bad team in the NFL. And that is not going to be good enough, especially in a division that is as competitive as the AFC West. So didn't want to spend too much time on that, but did want to acknowledge, I mean, just a really poor performance from the Denver Broncos. They came back late in the game, but it wasn't enough. And of course, they couldn't stop the run toward the end well enough to make a difference in that contest. Just a bad look. Teddy Bridgewater, I mean, you have to put up more than 14 points in that spot, especially against Case Keenum, when 20 would have won you the game. Just a little bit embarrassing, I think, for Teddy Bridgewater and the Denver Broncos. Of course, they get some softer opponents coming up later in the season, but I don't know if it's going to be enough for them to bounce back from what they've had happen to them over these last few weeks. So we'll move on to the Sunday slate now, folks, and we will focus on, I mean, just right off the jump here, one of the best games on the schedule, and that's something I never thought I would say about a Cincinnati Bengals Baltimore Ravens matchup, but here we are, 2021. Am I right, folks? Last week, you had the Bengals beat up on the Lions. They looked really good on the road. The Ravens just crushed the Chargers in arguably the most impressive performance of the Week 6 slate. Here you have the Bengals 6.5-point road underdogs, total, I don't know, 46.5. And this is a game where I would lean towards Cincinnati. I think that the quarterback play has been high level on both sides in this matchup. You could argue there was high-level quarterback play for Justin Herbert coming in against the Ravens last week, and that's certainly fair. But Joe Burrow has been just excellent so far this season. Both these quarterbacks top 5 in the league in yards per pass attempt so far this season. Here's the difference for me. The Cincinnati Bengals defense a little bit better than that of Baltimore this year. I mean, Cincinnati's a top 10 defense in terms of yards per play allowed. They have been excellent on the defensive end of the field. And you look at the matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is really difficult to defend, right? He can pass right now. I mean, right now, he's passing at the highest level we've seen him pass at. And you combine that with his running ability, that's certainly a tough matchup for any team. Working in Cincinnati's favor, though, they have seen Lamar Jackson a couple of times a year. That's not enough to guarantee they can stop him, of course, but if you have that familiarity with a quarterback, you've seen him on the field against you specifically, you can at least hammer out an idea as far as, okay, here's what we need to do, and here's what we may not have done the first time trying to slow him down. I'm not saying they're going to shut Lamar Jackson out or anything like that, but I think that the Bengals defense can at least slow Lamar Jackson down just a little bit and keep this within a touchdown game. And with that deep ball connection, I mean, Burrow and Chase, but they're getting some explosive plays on short passes as well. The blocking out of the wide receivers has been really good. This has been a very impressive offensive performance to start the season for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think they're going to make this a respectable ball game. Don't hate the idea of the over either, but I would lean toward the Bengals plus the 6.5 as the best play for this game. Now let's move to the NFC and let's move to the Washington football team taking on the Green Bay Packers. The Packers 7.5-point home favorites, total 48.5. And this is a rough stretch schedule for the Washington football team, folks. You have the football team. They lost to the Saints by double figures, just played the Kansas City Chiefs, lost to them by double figures. Now your reward for those two tough games, guess what? You're going to Lambeau. You're playing Aaron Rodgers. That is not a situation you want to find yourself in. The Packers, you had the emotional win over the Chicago Bears last week. Aaron Rodgers is just celebrating very vigorously after scoring there for the Packers in Soldier Field. The I still own you. He's doing the title belt celebration again. You can tell he's fired up right now, and that team is firing on all cylinders. And the defense of the Washington football team, I just don't think is going to be able to slow down Green Bay, right? Green Bay put up 24 points last week on the road against a very good Chicago Bears defense. You got to figure they're going to put up more than that at home against a Washington team that has just been a sieve defensively as of late. I mean, they made Daniel Jones look good a while back. They've made Mahomes look good. Jameis looked pretty good against them. I just don't think the Washington football team defense can get stops as consistently as you like in this game. The connection between Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers has been fantastic so far this year. I do not see that stopping. I would lean toward the Packers as a 7.5-point favorite in this game. Just look at the way Washington's been playing as of late. They've been dropping games by double figures at home. I don't think it's going to go any better for them on the road here against the Green Bay Packers team that is, like I said, just playing an absolutely high level on the offensive end, even without the scoring being there, right? I mean, you look at the last 2 weeks, relatively low scoring against Cincinnati, right? It was in the mid-20s for most of that game. And then you had, of course, last week, the 24 points against the Packers. I'm sorry, against the Bears for the Packers. I think they're going to put up a higher number this week against the football team. I really do. Now for possibly the ugliest game of the Week 7 schedule, I am talking about the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Miami Dolphins. Total in this game, 48. Falcons 2.5-point favorites. This is a game where if this is your viewing option, right, if you don't have Red Zone and you're stuck watching the local feed and this happens to be the game, let you just go do something else, right? Like, well, we all love football. You don't need to love it to the point of abusing yourself by watching the Falcons and the Dolphins, right? The NBA is back. There's a ton of other sports going on. Just do something else, or you can just hang out with your wife and kids. Just do something else if this is your only viewing option. But I do think that the Miami Dolphins have the potential to get a victory here, right? It's been a rough year for the Miami Dolphins so far. They just lost to the Jaguars in London, had to travel all the way overseas just to lose to the most embarrassing franchise in the NFL. It's been really rough for the Miami Dolphins. However, Tua Tagovailoa looked pretty good last week against Jacksonville, right? He found Jalen Waddle, a couple of short yardage touchdowns. He's playing well in the red zone. I think that's really important. And the Atlanta defense is one that's going to give you chances, right? Both of these teams bottom 6 in terms of yards per play on offense, but the Atlanta defense is one that, I mean, let's face it, they made Taylor Heineke look like Steve Young earlier this season, and that was at home. I think the Miami Dolphins have a real shot here to get back into the win column. The Deshaun Watson trade rumors are swirling around. I think that might fire Tua up as well. But just from a numerical standpoint, I think that the Dolphins, as a home underdog in this game, you got to remember the statistical output of the Dolphins really hampered by the Jacoby Brissett portion of the season, right? So when you see the numbers looking just abysmal for the Miami Dolphins, you got to remember Tua played the first game and a half. He got knocked out, and then he just came back again. Looked really good in his return. I think the Dolphins do have some potential value as an underdog. Another game featuring a team from the AFC East that has the potential to be just gross, just an ugly game. Jets Patriots, folks. Jets 6.5-point underdogs, total 43. I think the under is the best look in this game. We saw this game play out once, right? We saw it play out at MetLife Stadium. It was a 25-6 victory for the New England Patriots. I mean, they ate Zach Wilson alive in that game. They picked him off. I think it was 4 times. It was just an ugly scene. I think we see something similar to that in this contest, right? Again, 2 rookie quarterbacks. Neither of them have looked much better over the last few weeks than they did in that first matchup between the Jets and the Patriots. Mac Jones, you could argue, he had the completion streak against the Patriots. He looked pretty good against the Houston Texans, but everybody looks good against the Houston Texans. I just don't see a real improvement on the offensive end right now. Zach Wilson, he had a good game against the Titans, but that seems to have been kind of a flash in the pan as the Falcons really stymied them in London right after that. I just don't see this game scoring a lot of points. Both of these teams, bottom 10 in terms of yards per play on offense. They're both in the top half of the league in terms of yards per play on defense. Again, Bill Belichick at home against a rookie quarterback. I think we see a real low number here for the Jets that could very well lend itself to an under in that contest. Now, the other New York team is also in action. I say New York, and then somebody's going to chirp me and say, oh, they're actually from New Jersey. I don't care. I'm from the southern part of New York, so they're a New York team as far as I'm concerned. The New York Giants, they are hosting the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, 2.5-point favorites on the road. Total 43, another really low total, and I think, again, that it is justified. I would lean toward the under in this matchup as well. And you look at the injuries on both sides and the way that they can impact the offenses on both of these teams. Andrew Thomas, now an injured reserve for the Giants, the offensive tackle. He was terrible last year, but he has improved to the point where Andrew Thomas being on injured reserve really does hurt the Giants offense. And then you have the injuries to all the skill guys for the Giants. I mean, you're talking about Saquon Barkley came off the ankle injury. You're talking about Galladay, Slayton, all these guys questionable on the injury report. They're just not at 100% as a team right now, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And then you look at the Panthers. Christian McCaffrey was placed on injured reserve as well. And, you know, he's their Swiss Army knife. He's their jack of all trades, the guy who can do it all on the offensive side of the ball for that Carolina team. And without him, I mean, you're really putting your eggs in the Sam Darnold basket. And before the season, I said, I think you're going to find with this Panthers team that Sam Darnold is going to be the problem, that it wasn't a Teddy Bridgewater issue in Carolina, that it just, you know, was a rough year for them last year. And then you have Sam Darnold come in. He's not going to fix it. And so far, that's been the case. I mean, he has not been terrific by any stretch of the imagination. Carolina defense has been good, though. You got to give them credit for that. 6th in the league in terms of yards per play allowed this season against a banged-up Giants team. I think you see an under come in here. You know, I don't know that I would necessarily want to put my faith in either of these teams to deliver a consistent performance on either side of the ball. But if I did have to make a play on this game, I think the under 43 would be the play, as you have to answer the question, can Daniel Jones function now without his offensive tackle there to protect him? A guy who, again, last year was a turnstile. Just shows you how much things can change and how quickly they can change in the NFL with Andrew Thomas and his rapid improvement so far in his career. Now let's get to, in my opinion, the best game of the week, right? We talked about the Bengals and the Ravens earlier. It's kind of up there in the conversation, but I think Chiefs-Titans has the potential to be the best game of the week in the NFL, just from a pure entertainment standpoint, right? I mean, you have two offenses that are so dynamic, not a lot of defense expected to be played in this game. Total set for 58. Big old total there, 58. Chiefs a 5-point favorite on the road. And I guess if I had to go any direction here, it would be the Tennessee Titans as a home underdog. I mean, Kansas City, third in the league in terms of yards per play this season. The Titans, they are not as high up in that category, right? But you look at the reason why, and that's because they like to run the ball, right? They rely so heavily on moving the ball on the ground with Derrick Henry. Well, the Titans, they're top 5 in the league in terms of yards per carry, and that's a big problem for the Kansas City Chiefs. They are tied for the second worst run defense per carry in the league, giving up 5.2 yards per attempt to opposing rushers. And this is a game where the blueprint is very simple for the Tennessee Titans. You need to keep the ball on the ground. You need to possess it as long as you possibly can to keep the ball away from Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and those boys from the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think they're going to do exactly that. Let's face it, they got a great tune-up for this Chiefs game last week on Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills, right? Same situation. Dynamic offense led by Josh Allen of the Bills. And what did the Titans do? They ran it down the throats of the Buffalo Bills with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry getting in the end zone multiple times. And I think we see another situation where the Titans, they know they have to do it going in, and I think they are going to execute it very well. The only question coming into this game is there a fatigue factor for the Titans coming in on a short week, emotional game, goal line stand at the end, Josh Allen slipping in front of the first down marker. And of course, you're playing not only on a short week, but after a big emotional victory. I don't think that's going to be a huge deal, especially with the fact that the Titans know that after a pretty sluggish start to the season, losing to the Jets, getting blown out by the Arizona Cardinals, that they need to string more wins together if they are going to be seeded favorably in the AFC this season. And I mean, again, I just think it comes down to the fact that the Chiefs defense is just abysmal. Don't get me wrong. Chiefs love to put up points. They're great at that, but they don't get stops consistently enough to justify laying this kind of number on the road. I mean, if you would have put this number in front of me against the Washington football team last week, it wouldn't have worked out, but I would have very much considered taking the points with the Washington football team just because of how porous the defense of the Kansas City Chiefs is. So if I had to make a play on this game, it would be the Titans, but I think I'm going to sit back with a big old thing of popcorn and just enjoy what should be the most entertaining game on the Sunday slate by quite a bit. Now, a game that is not expected to have similar entertainment value, the Detroit Lions, 15.5-point underdogs, taking on the LA Rams on the road, total of 51. And we're going to get into a few games here where the point spreads are just gigantic. Just some massive point spreads coming up. So please do brace yourself for those. But I think among those games with the big point spreads, I would say that the Rams, if you had to pick one, and again, I say this every week basically, you don't have to pick one. You are not required to bet on any NFL games, let alone all of them. People on Thursday Night Football, people were running to bet on that Broncos-Browns game when we didn't know anybody on that field for the Cleveland Browns on offense. It happened to work out for them. But in terms of getting an edge, sometimes it's just not there. You don't always have to play it. But I do think that in the case of this game, if you had to take one of those double-digit favorites this week in the NFL, this would probably be the one to take in the LA Rams. Injuries on the offensive line for the Detroit Lions, a big reason for that. Taylor Decker now on IR for the Lions. He joins Frank Ragnow. I mean, you're talking about two starting offensive linemen out for a period of time now for the Detroit Lions. That is going to cause huge problems. And it's not as if they were lighting it up offensively before those injuries happened. The Jared Goff trade has certainly not gone well for the Lions. Of course, they get to be reminded of that this week against the LA Rams, who, of course, they traded Matt Stafford to in order to get Goff. And I think just from kind of a narrative perspective, I think that kind of feeds into why the Rams are a decent look here as well. You have Matt Stafford playing against an organization in the Lions that never was able to put a team around him and an organization and a culture and a coaching staff around him that made it possible for him to have any real success. He put up a lot of numbers in Detroit. a lot of them in garbage time when the team just needed to air it out. They were never able to put a team around him that could even be a threat in the postseason. And I think we see Matt Stafford take a lot of frustrations about that time in his life out on Detroit this week. You look at the statistical output of the Rams so far this year, they are averaging 9.1 yards a pass attempt as a team. That is good for number one in the league. You look at the Lions, led by Jared Goff, they rank 30th in the NFL in that category. And a lot of that just has to do with how far down the field these two dudes throw the ball. Stafford has extended the Rams offense vertically down the field. Goff just simply is not built that way. It's just not a part of his game. And I think we're going to see that disparity on full display this week. And I think, again, if you had to take one of these double-digit favorites, the LA Rams, 15.5-point favorites, I really don't hate the idea. I personally, again, I cannot lay that big a number. I won't do it. But if you wanted, if you were thinking about it, I would say that would probably be the one you'd want to do that for. Now, a game with a single-digit number, we're going to get back to the double-digit spreads in just a little bit. But one with a single-digit number we're going to get to in the 4 o'clock slate first. And we are talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, 3-point underdogs on the road against the Las Vegas Raiders, total 49. The Eagles coming into this game with a little bit of extra rest, right? They played Thursday Night Football last week. Decent game. Ended up covering the spread against all odds, 2-point conversion, making it a 28-22 loss to the Bucs instead of 28-21, which was, as some play-by-play broadcasters would say, was significant to some, I would say. Meanwhile, the Raiders, they get a win against the Denver Broncos, and that was one of the more fascinating outcomes of last week because they didn't have a full-on head coach. I mean, they obviously have an interim right now, but that was the first week of John Gruden not being the coach of the Raiders. And it's super interesting to me that they not only got a win against the division opponent, but they did it on the road, mile high, hostile environment, which tells me two things. Number one, you credit the Raiders because they rallied around themselves at a time where it could have been really easy to say, well, this is just a real messed up situation and we can kind of throw in the towel on what's going to be a real disaster of a season now. No, they didn't do that. And you give them a lot of credit. The other thing I take away from that, again, just the Denver Broncos, just not good. I mean, just that's embarrassing. 2 straight losses for the Denver Broncos. Not to make the show completely about the Broncos here. 2 straight losses for the Broncos here. One against a team with a ghost head coach against the Las Vegas Raiders. And then one against Case Keenum and Dearness Johnson. Dearness goes to camp or whatever his name was for the Cleveland Browns. Those are 2 embarrassing losses back-to-back for the Broncos. Tangent over. We'll get back to the Raiders here. Give them a lot of credit for what we saw last week. This week, I think the under is probably the best way to go in this game, under 49. And it comes down to a couple of things. First of all, some tight end issues for the Eagles. Dallas Goedert is off the COVID-19 list, but they traded away Zach Ertz, and now they're having health problems with Dallas Goedert. That's going to really affect the production at the tight end position, which is a big part of this Philadelphia Eagles offense. You know what's not a big part of the Philadelphia Eagles offense? The running game. It's baffling to me. They are one of the 5 best teams in the NFL in terms of their yards per carry average this season, but they refuse to dedicate themselves to running the ball frequently. I get a lot of that average is Jalen Hurts scrambles and things like that, but they simply do not commit to running the football well enough to make that an impactful part of their game when it's worked for them in the rare instances that they actually do hand the ball off. It's very strange to me. And I think that the play calling does drag their scoring output down along with it. Now, these two teams dead even in terms of yards per play for and against this year. Very interesting stuff. The question here for the Raiders, at home after an emotional road win without John Gruden, can they do it again? That's going to be the question all season now for the Raiders. Yeah, sure, you may have passed one test, leaped over one hurdle of adversity. Can you do it again and again without the man who was supposed to lead your organization for, a decade? Can they do that? I'm not sure. I think we see a couple of mistakes potentially from Derek Carr in this game. You're always due for a Jalen Hurts mistake or two as well. I think this game stays under. I think that both of these teams they're going to struggle to find their identity. The Eagles, it's apparently by design. They just refuse to run the ball when that could very well be the best part of their offense. And the Raiders, they're going to have to work through this whole situation week by week. I think we're going to see this game be a little sloppy on both sides, leading to an under as far as the total is concerned. Now let's get back to some double-digit favorites in the NFL, shall we? Let's do that. Let's talk about the Houston Texans taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Houston, a 17.5-point underdog. 17.5. These are like the early 2010s Jacksonville Jaguars type spreads for the Houston Texans. Total in this game, by the way, is 47.5. And it's funny, right? Because you see these giant numbers and you're like, wow, like there's no way a professional football team could be this bad. But the Houston Texans are proven, actually, yeah, maybe they are that bad. The Houston Texans under Davis Mills, with him as their starting quarterback, they've played 4 games. They have failed to score 10 points or more in 3 of those 4 games. Of course, the one exception was at home against the Patriots, coming off of the emotional Tom Brady game. The Texans have been a disaster with Davis Mills as their quarterback. They have lost by 15 or more points in 3 of his 4 starts so far. When you fail to break double digits in scoring in the NFL, that's bound to happen. But I mean, it has been bad. I mean, there was a 40-0 mixed in there. It has been bad with Davis Mills as the quarterback. On the flip side, everything's been great for the Arizona Cardinals. They're 5-1 against the spread. Kyler Murray's playing at an MVP level. Last week, they didn't even need a coach. They didn't even need their head coach, and they still managed to beat up on the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. It was incredible. By the way, coaching in the NFL feels awfully overrated after a week where the Raiders won with a headless horseman as their head coach against the Denver Broncos. And then you had Cliff Kingsbury out for the Cardinals, and they blow out the Cleveland Browns. It's like I feel like I'm sitting in Office Space with the Bobs right now asking NFL head coaches, oh, what is it you do around here? Because the good teams apparently are just winning anyway. It's been funny as, books every week are complaining that, we're having our worst week ever. The public is cleaning up. Yeah, when teams are covering the spread as favorites without their coaches, it certainly would not be good for the books, one would think. And this is a game where the very same thing could happen. We don't know Cliff Kingsbury's status yet for this game. But with or without him, I don't think you could possibly take the Houston Texans in this game. Again, I'm not laying 17.5 with the Cardinals either. But the Houston Texans, you can't justify a play on them right now. The weakness of the Cardinals, if you look at every phase of what it is they've done during their 6-0 start, you'd have to say it's their run defense, right? Their bottom 3 team in terms of yards per carry allowed. The problem is the Houston Texans just do not have the horses in their backfield. They don't have the offensive line to make Arizona pay for their sketchy run defense. And I mean, Cleveland didn't either. Cleveland has the best run defense in the game, and they couldn't take advantage last week against the Arizona Cardinals. This is a game where I wouldn't bet it in any form or fashion. I'm going to sit back and I want to see how ugly can this get. Can it get worse than 40-0? I don't know. Let's find out. I have a morbid curiosity about this game between the Texans and the Cardinals, and really nothing more as far as I'm concerned. Now, we have one final double-digit favorite in the NFL this week. That is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are 12-point home favorites taking on the Chicago Bears. Total 47.5. And this is a game that we saw played last year in Soldier Field on Thursday Night Football. The Chicago Bears beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers outright in that game. I believe Tampa Bay was somewhere around a 4.5 point favorite in that contest, if memory serves. And it was a game where it was pretty close throughout. The Bucs had the ball late with a chance to win it. And Tom Brady forgot what down it was. He thought that he had an extra down to work with on the final drive. It turned out he did not. They turned it over on downs, and that was the end of the game. Obviously, we're expecting a different result this time as things are so different for the Chicago Bears right now. Justin Fields is the quarterback, not the combination of Trubisky and Nick Foles and whatever else was going on with Chicago last year. I don't know that that necessarily matters in terms of who covers the spread in this game. I think 12 points might be a little bit too much for this contest. And my reasoning behind that is simply the fact that the Bears have shown they are at least capable of getting a little bit of pressure on Tom Brady already with this Bucs team, right? Can they do that again is the question. The Bears, listen, if they're going to cover this number, it is not going to be with their offense. Dead last in the league in yards per play gained. Huge offensive mismatch in this contest. In fact, you're talking about a nearly 2 yard per play difference between the Bucs and the Bears heading into this game. Tampa Bay is running circles around the offense of Chicago. But we've seen, you saw against Cleveland, Chicago at least made them work for their points. They held them to 26 at home that day for the Cleveland Browns, even though it ended up being a 26-6 game. Justin Fields, he's been a little bit better since then. If he can get me 20-ish, if he can get me 17 to 20, I think that should be enough for the Bears to cover the spread here. I'm a little squeamish about betting on it just because we have seen the Bears get beaten by double figures a few times here over the last few weeks. But I would say if there was a direction to go in this game, I do think taking the double figures with the Chicago Bears, probably the best way to go. So 3 double-digit spreads. I say if you have to play them, again, I'm not playing these double-digit games. If you have to play them, you lay the chalk with the Rams against that disgusting Lions team. You just stay away entirely from the Texans and the Cardinals. I think that number is too big, but I don't want to back Davis Mills. I can't do it. And then the Bears, probably the best way to go in the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, watch all of these be wrong, and the next week we can all come back and have a good laugh at my expense, because that's usually how it goes here on the GBI show. We got 2 games left on the schedule here, and we will start with Sunday Night Football. Indianapolis Colts taking on the San Francisco 49ers, total 44. Last week, of course, the Colts had their nice little get-right game against the Houston Texans. Everybody has that game against the Houston Texans. Niners off a bye this week. Now, the Niners are struggling with their quarterback situation, right? They always say, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. Well, right now, the Niners might have none because of injuries. Both guys, Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, questionable on the injury report. Kyle Shanahan saying he expects Garoppolo to be fine to go as their starting quarterback. But already this season, we have seen consistency issues from both quarterbacks from the Niners. And this is a game where going in, you would think Carson Wentz is the guy who has the consistency issues. Well, Wentz, he's been pretty good the last few weeks. Colts have won 2 out of 3. Of course, they won a couple of games against some lower tier competition. But Wentz, even against the Baltimore Ravens, the game that they lost in overtime on Monday Night Football a couple weeks ago, he looked really good in that game. And the difference for Wentz lately has been the ability to connect on vertical passes. He's found a very nice connection with Michael Pittman. He scored a touchdown with him against the Ravens. Wentz hasn't been the turnover machine that we've all come to know. And instead, he's starting to connect down the field a little bit. I think that makes the Colts a pretty dangerous team in a situation like this against a 49ers squad who they've struggled defensively in some games already at home, and they have the consistency issues at the quarterback position. The question for me, can the Colts play some good enough defense to limit the Niners, to exacerbate those quarterback problems? And that's where I'm not so sure. Colts pass defense allowing 7.8 yards per attempt so far this season. That puts them in the bottom 5 in the league. And this could be one of those get-right spots off the bye for the Niners and their kind of weird, inconsistent quarterback room. This could be the game where they get back on track. It's a stay away for me. I just think that there are some real glaring weaknesses on both sides to where it's hard to find a definitive advantage that you can rely on for the course of a game. So I will be staying away from this one entirely. But it should be a pretty entertaining Sunday night game regardless, as you have kind of a Swiss cheese pass defense for the Colts. And then you have the Colts' ability to kind of air things out a little bit better than they've been able to in recent weeks. And I think we could see some fireworks on both sides. Should be at least pretty fun to watch from that perspective. Final game of the Week 7 slate, final game we will break down here on the GBI show is the New Orleans Saints, 4.5-point favorites, taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Total 42.5. Saints coming off a bye. Seahawks lost to the Steelers in overtime on Sunday Night Football last week. Of course, that game was the return of Geno Smith, NFL starting quarterback. And it was not as bad as a lot of people thought it was going to be, right? The Steelers did not cover the number in that game. Geno got the cover, and he played decent at times in that game. I mean, it's a good Steelers defense, so it was a tough ask for him in his first start anyway. But I do think that he played pretty admirably in that game, and I think he's going to do it again this week. I think that the Seahawks are a pretty live dog. I would lean toward them in this matchup and take the points. Jameis Winston on the road has been very hit or miss, right? He was very good against the Washington football team defense. That's just not good. Let's face it, they're just not good on defense. And he did have a decent game against the Patriots. At least the Saints as a whole had a decent game against the Patriots, but some turnovers from Mac Jones set up some pretty easy scoring situations for New Orleans in that contest. I think in this game, you see a decent performance from the Seattle defense against Jameis, who's very turnover prone, as we know. And I think you see Geno outperform the expectations that a lot of people have for him, which isn't to say he's going to play great. It's to say that the expectations of Geno Smith are just extremely low, right? People just do not think that he is going to deliver a decent performance from game to game, let alone one that's good enough to win contests against teams like the Saints. But I think a Monday night home crowd, I think Geno is going to be respectable in this contest. And I think that the Seahawks, if they don't get a win, I think we see a field goal game there. I think it's going to be a pretty entertaining affair. Folks, that's your GBI show for this week. That's week 7. I am very excited for what we have in store in the weeks to come over at ATS, man. We've got NFL previews. Yours truly handling the NBA beat, giving you nightly NBA predictions, which surprisingly have not gone poorly thus far. Very excited about that. Had the Miami Heat yesterday as an even money line pick. Got a little CLV on it, and they won by 40. So that was pretty nice. NFL picks as well. You have MMA. My guy TJ Calkins is on an absolute heater. You do not want to miss that. Baseball picks still going strong. We have an actual Canadian delivering hockey predictions. Chase Rudig, our newest member of the ATS team. You do not want to miss him. It is going to be a really exciting time at ATS. And of course, the GBI show will be coming every week as well. So we will see you back here. Supposed to be Thursday. We will try and get it back on track for Thursday next week. We'll see you back here. We'll preview week 8 of the NFL season next time on the GBI show. Until next time, this is Jay Sanin saying see you later. Good luck on all your NFL bets this week. More importantly, spend some time with your family. Have a good time. We will see you next time.